with Care is a wonderful pop.
Great song.
It's a wonderful pop song. Yeah.
Great song.
Yep.
There's that one. And
Last Night.
well, it's all right. Riding around in the breeze.
To the end of the line. Yeah.
End of the line. End of the line and Handle with Care. Those are
and Last Night is good. The one that Tom Petty sings is kind of funny. Yeah. That must apparently they had a lot of fun making those records. I'm sure they did.
It sounded like it.
Yeah.
It sounded like they were having fun.
I'm a big admirer of Jeff Lynne. I think he's I think he's one of the greats.
I'm a big admirer of bandit costumes.
Yeah. Are we live?
Yeah, we're live.
Yeah, we are live and we're being recorded.
Okay.
How do you disengage this?
I don't know. We're all stuck now.
I can't get my glasses off. I can't get them off, man.
You can't get that pipe out of your mouth. It's stuck.
I can't get the pipe off. I can't get this glass of wine out of my hand. It's terrible. But my hair still keeps falling out.
We can fix that.
Hey, first day of class, Will Fahey.
First day of class. Yeah. Oh, sorry. First day of class. Let me fix that. That's right. It was the first day of class.
Yeah, we're live, folks.
Yes, we are live.
Chris, you ready to?
Yeah.
It's not the top. No, it's 3 minutes.
No, we got 3 minutes of fun banter. And first day of class, and you're cooking dinner tonight, William.
No, actually, I didn't have to do that.
Oh.
My son made chicken salad. Yeah. The one thing I do
dinner tonight because we're doing a play. We're doing a play this week, so I'm a widower.
Oh.
And so my wife's, at the theater for 18 hours a day. So I did a wonderful pork roast tonight. You guys would have loved it. It was great.
Did you make it with pork?
Yeah, I used real pork.
That's good.
It's better with real pork.
I think so. Yeah.
Now, when you say, you mean the shoulder, the butt, right?
Yeah, it was a shoulder roast. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you.
It was.
I think that may be one of my most favorite. I know it is. I love roast pork.
It's cheap, and the meat was so tender. It just fell apart. It was
so Nicholas and I like to cook it this way for about 8 or 9 hours at around 270.
Do you do it in the oven or in a crock pot?
No, in the oven.
No, I do it in a crock pot.
That makes it kind of too, I don't know, stewy, or I don't know.
That's cheating, crock pots.
Yeah. I don't know if I approve of that, Dale.
No, I'm sorry. I firmly disapprove of that method.
Okay, I didn't want to just come out and say, oh, this is a funny story. We have an occasional show on Catholic Answers Live that features Cy Kellett and Joe Heschmeyer and yours truly, and we all wear flannel shirts. So we call it the flannel panel. Get it? Anyway, I got a note from a woman telling me that I interrupt Cy and Joe too much, and they're afraid to express their opinions because I'm their boss.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, well, so I'm trying not to interrupt anymore or disagree. Dale, if you want to make pork in a crock pot, I'm sure it's okay for you.
No, you don't understand how good it is. You don't even begin to know how good it is. And I'd be happy to. You guys are frozen, so I don't know if you hear me, but I'd be happy to have a pork off with you, Chris.
Okay. Where do you think should we meet in the middle of the country and do this?
We'll meet at my house.
I guess Dan.
I will provide the hogs.
There you go. There you go.
And we will have a Troubadour pork throwdown.
There you go.
Bring it on.
Good.
I feel like, Dan, if you're going to provide a hog, we should just roast it outside over a spit.
We'll do the spit, or you can do the traditional Hawaiian method of digging a pit and burying your hog and covering it with coals.
Yeah. And
I
banana
think it should.
leaves.
I think it should be a 3-day affair because I think we should do ribs one day also.
Okay.
We'll
Yeah.
do it. We'll do
Okay.
it. I'm in.
Okay, we have a plan.
Do we have the green light from Margaret?
I think we're being streamed.
Yeah, no, it's like we're on, Chris. You're in charge.
No, but she said she had to resend the invitation.
Yeah, no, she did. This is it.
No members yet. Still working on it.
Oh, never mind. Never
Yeah,
mind.
Hey, read the chat, man.
No, I see the chat now. I see it.
Yeah.
Are we being recorded though?
Yeah, we're being recorded.
Okay. So
Yeah,
it's
but
just
for
a
the
live.
but for
We're
the three
live,
people
we're
that
being
watch the
recorded.
Troubadours,
There's no live studio audience right now.
yeah.
Although this might be it. They may not sign up tonight. I've already gotten angry emails about rock and roll. Okay, so
I didn't get a single email.
I've
Wow.
gotten them.
You have not.
I have. I've gotten angry emails about
Read
rock and
'em.
roll.
Read them.
Read them out loud.
Let's hear them.
No, I have to look them up. That means
See, God, you froze because you were making that up.
Yeah, that's right.
Nobody wrote an angry email about rock and roll
I know. I hope
to
not.
Dale.
Hey, Ben Dunlap says it's live. All right. And Ben Dunlap is a man you can hang your hat on or give your hat to. So we're live.
Oh, there you are, Dale.
Here we are.
Dale,
First
are you
flame.
gonna Dale, are you
Dale's
gonna
back
read
in a
one
puff-
angry
puff of
emails about
smoke.
rock and roll?
Yeah. Nope, he's out again. This is
Okay.
like a bad Kiss concert with the flames going wrong.
It's like
hear
Spinal
me?
Tap. It's
like Spinal
Tap, where the little Stonehenge comes down.
Yeah, the age of the Druids.
Yeah.
Stonehenge. Ours go to 11. Okay,
Stonehenge.
hey, my friends, welcome to Tuesdays with the Troubadours. And I think this is one of the days where we're actually on the third Tuesday.
Woo!
We're not with our friend Joseph Pierce, who is the one person really to talk about rock and roll music, given his extensive background in the field. Those of you who've read Joseph's book know that he and his brother ran a record store at one time, right? Anyway, he can talk about pop music next time he's on. This topic began as something of a joke, but
Unlike
Well,
all
and
the other.
and it may in fact end as something of one. We'll see. But I'm Chris Check from Catholic Answers. I'm your host,
Hey, Chris.
and we're going to talk tonight about popular music. An essay came across my desk the other day, written 10 years ago, and I forgot now who it was by, but it was a Marxist scholar who was writing actually a fairly thoughtful piece called A Marxist Grapples with Tolkien. And what he was trying to do was, he admits in the beginning, he says, look, we know plenty about what Tolkien's politics were, but what an honest Marxist historian will want to do is understand why Tolkien, why the Lord of the Rings, apart from Tolkien's views that he expressed, is so popular. He said, an honest Marxist has to confront this as a cultural force. I thought that was an honest thing to say. And so using that as a point of departure, the Troubadours need to confront pop music because it is a cultural force. It's a big one. It's a significant one. And is it all for ill? Is there any merit in it at all? William gave us this observation that we use to tease the show from T.S. Eliot, saying that in a healthy culture, the high and the low are never too far apart. So do we have a healthy culture now where the high and the low are never too far apart, or is there a great gap here and we have an unhealthy culture? probably some of each, maybe more of the latter. But I do think there's something redemptive, if not high art or culture, in some popular music, and I'm prepared to make that case. But I'll come around to my own defense of one artist in particular in a moment, and I'm going to let William go first.
All right.
William Fahey, President, Thomas More College of Liberal Arts in New Hampshire.
Thank you, Chris. I am going first because I will probably be leaving first. In fact, I'm almost sure of it. My oldest son is at his first driver's ed class, and I have to pick him up, which is also why tonight I'm drinking Seltzerade, sparkling blood orange Seltzerade from New England. Delicious. So
I'm also having dry January Pellegrino.
oh, I'm just having a dry Troubadour. As soon as I come back from driving and pack for my trip tomorrow, I might have a glass of wine.
All right.
All right. To speak about something I know nothing about. Of course, I teach at a great books college, so I went to my collection and pulled the tome off of, the significant popular works that we would consider in a seminar at a place not like Thomas More College. And as I was leafing through, I found a song, a popular song that I think would be good to read out loud and discuss, because it allows us to see all there is to be seen in taking seriously popular music. And as I leafed through, I came upon the 1978 classic by the B-52s, Planet Claire, which I'd like to read for you, and then we'll talk about it. She came from Planet Claire. I knew she came from there. She drove a Plymouth satellite, a faster than the speed of light. The refrain I'll leave aside till the end. Planet Claire has pink air. All the trees are red. No one ever dies there. No one has a head. Some say she's from Mars, or one of the 7 stars that shine after 3:30 in the morning. But she isn't. She came from Planet Claire. She came from Planet Claire. She came from Planet Claire. Now, there's no way in my allotted time that I can plumb the depths of this song. I just want to note a few things. First, we open up with the "She came from Planet Claire." Certainly, Kate Pearson and Fred Schneider were tapping into the long-standing tradition of understanding Suke, the soul, as she. She came from Planet Claire. I know she came from there. So this isn't purely theoretical. It is what we would call science. It's more than opinion. The poet, or at least the voice within the poem, is asserting a kind of poetic knowledge above opinion. But let's move on. What is going on in this poem? Because right away after the assertion of knowledge, the voice in the poem undermines itself by the line, "She drove a Plymouth satellite faster than the speed of light." Now, there are 2 obvious problems here. Has anyone seen a woman drive a Plymouth satellite?
Yeah.
And if you check the speedometer, it's an impressive vehicle from 1965 to 1974, the Plymouth satellite, remarkable. But that speedometer only goes up to 150. It does not go up to the speed of light. So what is the poet revealing here? He is hinting that Planet Claire is not really utopian, but a dystopian planet.
Mm.
Planet Claire has pink air. When is the air pink? Dan, you know, the air is pink when there are particulates in the air, signifying this is a polluted world.
Mm-hmm.
All the trees there are red, which means it's permanently stuck in one season. There's no real celestial movement there. But now here at the center of the poem, we come to the most interesting part. No one ever dies there. No one has a head. What does he mean, no one has a head? Clearly, the people on Planet Claire have neither intellectus nor ratio. They're ruled by their passions, an unmoored will ruled by their passions. And no one dies there. What could be worse than being ruled by your passions and to be immortal? This would practically be a vision of hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some say she's from Mars, symbol of war and violence,
Right.
or one of the 7 stars that shines after 3:30 in the morning. That, in the end, underscores, Joseph's not here, but we can say with him, who follows a star? The wise, those who know.
Yeah.
Right? But she is not from Mars. 3 times it is said she came from Planet Claire.
And we know this.
Yes, and we know this is his knowledge. And I would suggest if you look at the chiasmic structure of that final refrain, the center word is the most important word, from. She came from Planet Claire. She did not remain in the land that was without ratio and intellectus. She was leaving that on a journey. So, you know, when you turn to works like masterworks, we're not talking Meghan Trainor, masterworks like the B-52s, this clearly illustrates contemplation born from wonder of the natural universe, but a cautionary note about not being overly attached to that universe, because it may prove it's a dystopian world. And so the soul, the she, has to move from Planet Claire onward. It's brilliant. I think that simple exposition shows the richness of rock music, although the B-52 is not really rock music, alternative rock music.
Yeah.
Pop rock.
And popular culture. So there you go. I think it's indisputable. It's a great work of our civilization.
I also, well done, William. That's conclusive. And you know,
And inspired by Polar.
Well, yeah. You know, the 9 Greek muses. One of the muses is the muse of astronomy. And I think that one was particularly active in the inspiration of that song, right?
Well, you know where the B-52s are from?
Athens, Georgia.
Athens, cradle of wisdom.
Yeah,
So,
I think they were part of that
classical
original
Yeah.
effort that Mitch Easter did a lot of production for. I never cared for the B-52s at all, but now having had you plumb some of their finer lyrics there, William, I'm going to have to give them a listen. You know, they're touring again.
Are they really? Well,
Yeah.
Maybe we can get them to Fort Scott, Kansas.
Or Manchester.
Or Manchester. Yeah.
The one of their members is dead. Dead.
Wilson. What's his name? Wilson. Yeah. His sister is still in the band, I assume.
Yeah.
Did they did Love Shack?
Yes.
Well, no, that Kate
Rock
Pearson
Lobster.
of the B-52s joined up with REM, I think, to do Love Shack. Yeah. Another episode, we could plumb the depths of Love Shack.
Mm-hmm. Right. No,
That may have to be the first one that I ever miss.
Well, thank you, William. I hope that you're able to
Welcome.
stay with us longer.
Well, I'll stay with you for as long as I can, probably about another half an hour.
All right. So I know I'm the only one taking this seriously. So I'm going to go next. Well, I don't know, Dan. We may yet hear from you and how serious you're taking this. And I'll say by way of preface that when the conversation started among the troubadours, the germ of it was a friendly dispute between Dan Kerr and me about the merits of Bob Dylan. And I said, Warren Zevon is a better songwriter, performer, composer, lyricist, arranger. I think I got them all. Than Bob Dylan.
You left out Born in Minnesota. That's the one thing you left out.
You're right, because he was not born in Minnesota.
What? He was born in Minnesota.
No, Bob Dylan was.
Yeah, I thought that's who we're talking about. I keep going in and out.
We're talking about Warren Zevon. So let me back up.
Sorry about that. I keep losing you guys. Sorry.
All right, hang in there. What, Dale?
Yeah.
So I feel from time to time with the Troubadours that I have a responsibility to hold up a defense of and even love of my adopted state of California. And where pop music is concerned, our mind very quickly turns, particularly when we talk about Southern California, to the genius, and I mean in all sincerity, of Brian Wilson and the absolutely irresistible harmonies that he was able to achieve, I think in large part because he worked with blood brothers and a cousin. But Carl Dennis and Brian were able to achieve a harmony that I think you'll find also, although different, but the quality of it in the Everly Brothers, and more about the Everly Brothers in a moment. But Brian Wilson, for all of his genius and all of his talent and all that he represented of California, really was a pitch man for Southern California, especially in the early stages of his work. And then he, of course, moved into internal angst and things of this nature. And some of that work is very, very good. But he really was not a storyteller. He wasn't a troubadour. And the troubadour of Southern California is Warren Zevon. Warren Zevon operates from a cultural tradition that goes back to Nathaniel West, to Raymond Chandler. So two men who, in their literary work, I didn't realize how young Nathaniel West died, by the way, until I started doing preparation for this, in his 30s in a car crash in El Centro, just 80 miles east of us here. In any case, these men really spoke about Los Angeles in particular, and what do you want to call the seamy underbelly, but nonetheless the flowers growing in the cracks, if you will, in the human condition. And it's Warren Zevon who brings very much this understanding of humanity, the human condition, into his lyrics and his work. Warren Zevon grew up, he was the son of a Jewish gambler, probably gangster. That's how he described his father, and a Mormon mother, lived in various places, including Fresno, and eventually, after the marriage broke up, in Los Angeles. His father wasn't really a very good father, but he did buy him a piano. And Warren demonstrated remarkable talent for this. In fact, the man would go on to be able to play almost every instrument in the Philharmonic. He did not take lessons from Igor Stravinsky, as is sometimes reported, but nonetheless, there was something of a friendship. His piano teacher was a man named Robert Kraft, who became, if you will, sort of the Boswell of Igor Stravinsky, toured with him, conducted for him. He introduced Warren to Igor Stravinsky, and they visited a few times. And Warren was a very talented pianist. He read a great deal, a very fine writer. There's a story in high school where he handed in a composition for one of his high school composition classes, and the teacher gave it to him, said, "Here's your A, who wrote it for you?" And he says, I wrote it. So he was a good writer, read a great deal. He had talent with the piano, but Dan, he very much wanted to be the troubadour in the Bob Dylan mold. And so he went out to New York, did some gigs there for a while, was relatively unsuccessful at it, came back in 1969, recorded a record that is not an especially good piece of work called Wanted Dead or Alive, that was produced by Kim Fowley, but the less about whom said, the better. And it was an unsuccessful album. At this point, he was married to a woman named Crystal, his first wife, his first marriage having failed. And the two of them went off to Barcelona, Spain, where Warren made a living playing country western tunes in Irish bars in Barcelona. And it's in Barcelona that he begins his lifelong love with the Catholic faith. And Crystal, in her biography of Warren, which is called I'll Sleep When I'm Dead, it's pretty raw, so I recommend it with some reservations, but nonetheless, it's a very good biography. Describes a moment where Warren and his wife, Crystal, are sitting in the cathedral in the old district in the medieval district in Barcelona. And Warren is expressing to her his love of the Catholic faith and saying, we really need to become Catholics. Now, it's not even clear to me that Warren was ever baptized. Like I said, he was raised by a Mormon mother and a Jewish gambler father, but he had a lifelong interest in the Catholic faith. And he often described his work himself as very much like the divided heart of a Graham Greene. He gets a telegram or a postcard from his friend Jackson Browne. And Jackson says, I've made a deal for you with Asylum Records. Now, Asylum would have been the label known to some watchers of the Troubadours, where all that Laurel Canyon group was starting to produce. So all those, like the Byrds, all those people who were taking that folk troubadour sound that Dan is so much an admirer of, and I am as well, and bringing it out and giving it a pop quality in Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles. And it's with Asylum, produced by Jackson Browne, that Warren records his eponymous album. And if it had been his first album, it probably would have been the greatest first album of all time. And it's just called Warren Zevon. And there's a song on there, Frank and Jesse James, which was a tribute to the Everly Brothers, with whom Warren had toured, and he'd been their band manager for their short-lived TV show later in the 70s. And it ends with a song called Desperados Under the Eaves. My friends, if you do nothing else, listen to this song. And it is a song about a man who is struggling deeply with alcoholism. And so it's very much a cri de coeur, but it's a ballad. It's a story about a man in a very bad hotel fighting alcoholism. It is a beautiful number. And yet there are images in there that are deeply Christian. He's talking about, for example, looking at the sun through the trees, and don't the trees look like crucified thieves? So this album, his first, is still regarded as a masterpiece. It was followed up with a record called Excitable Boy, which included the song for which he's known, his only top 40 hit, which was kind of a throwaway novelty song, although it's still quite charming and entertaining, Werewolves of London, Also on there is a song called Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner. And here we see, for example, and another song called Veracruz, or that may be on the first one. No, it's on the second one, Excitable Boy. Warren very much as a storyteller, as a troubadour, as a balladeer, very good at telling stories all throughout his career. So stories about professional hockey players, about the fall of Veracruz in the Mexican Revolution, about mercenary Danes in the Biafra Wars, and about werewolves in London drinking pina coladas at Trader Vic's. His hair was perfect.
Perfect.
After these two records, Warren descends deeply into a very self-destructive lifestyle, heavily into alcoholism. It's kind of remarkable that he lived through it. As he later said, I got to be Jim Morrison for much longer than Jim Morrison did. But remarkably, and with the love of friends, including his wife, Crystal, Jackson Brown, a number of others, got him into rehab. It wasn't the first time, but eventually he kicks it. And in the late 70s, early 80s, produces another couple of good records, most of which are at this point near the end of his career are very much dealing with death. So My Rides Here, for example, I also would encourage you to listen to. In his mid-50s, Warren is diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, the name of which I'm forgetting just right now, but it has nothing to do with his destructive lifestyle. It's actually a rare form of cancer associated with asbestos. And at one time, it seems his father owned a carpet store, and he may have even contracted the asbestos fibers as young as a child. And by the time the disease was discovered, there was nothing that he could do. As he said to David Letterman, they were very close friends. In one of the interviews, he said, I made the strategic error of not going to a doctor for 20 years. In any case, he wrote produced one more record as he was dying, The Wind, it's called. And in fact, Dan, on there, he does a cover of Dylan's Knocking on Heaven's Door. Dylan had covered some of his songs and himself and had toured for them. And I encourage people to listen to this record as well. It's clearly a Christian record, though not a work of Christian rock or Christian pop, but a man dealing with death and eternity. And at the end of his life, in the last years of his life, he identified himself very much as a Christian. And I think this is clear in a lot of his work. Like I say, struggling with belief, but to quote Graham Greene, I don't believe in my own disbelief. So in any case, here is a man, and I'm going to steal from somebody here who writes, if you want to know what the 70s was like, you should listen to Warren Zevon's album from these decades. His songs are deceptively simple, rhythms are straightforward, but his music is like Hemingway's writing. Hemingway believed, and maybe demonstrated, that if you really know what you are writing about, you can leave out a lot. You can make it spare and simple, and the ballast of your secret knowledge will somehow impress itself upon the reader. You don't have to ornament. Ornament weakens the work. Zevon's work is like this. Listen to Desperados Under the Eaves, the closing track off of Warren Zevon. The chords are simple, but the wistful melody is Copland-esque. The string arrangements that flows in giving the track a cinematic sweep echoes the piano notes that at the beginning of Frank and Jesse James, a nod to Phil and Don Everly, suggesting that the album might be read as a kind of suite. There's a quiet sophistication in these songs. They're beautifully constructed, but unshowy to the point that sometimes musicians had to play them before they could fully appreciate them. I think Warren Zevon has made a real contribution to the understanding of California, of Los Angeles in particular in the 70s, but more than that, to what the grave struggle of a divided heart, a self-destructive lifestyle, but someone who nonetheless has his eyes on salvation and his music is well worth listening to. The end. These are my Warren Zevon glasses. All right, Dan. I left you
Correct.
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the song recommendations. I will look up the Desperados under, what is it? Under the Eaves?
Desperados Under the Eaves.
It reminds me of another one of my favorite songs by a Texas songwriter by the name of Guy Clark called Desperados Waiting for a Train.
Yes.
Which is a beautiful song. So I love music. I think honestly my earliest memory is sitting on the floor on oriental carpet, and my dad had a chair that was right next to the wood burning stove, and he would play songs, and he played the guitar. He didn't know the names of any chords. There were 3 chords that he played, and he referred to them as home, the bridge, and grandma's house. And he wrote a number of songs. And my earliest memories, honestly, are just sitting, listening to my dad play the guitar. And I have loved music dearly ever since then. And I've always loved, in particular, there's something deep in my blood. I think it's just my ancestry, but I love the music from the British Isles, particularly Ireland and Scotland. And honestly, I think that that's what popular music is. I mean, that is the original pop music. It's the music of the people. It's the music of people who are, in many cases, illiterate, but were able to write beautiful ballads and laments and songs of loss and longing and love and adventure. And I think this is what popular music is. In America, early popular music is Stephen Foster.
Amen.
That's what popular
Amen.
music is. And the greatest influences in American music, in popular American music, which I suppose we're labeling as low culture, which is curious to me, but there it is. But the major influences in early popular American music were the songs, the ballads that I mentioned from Ireland and Scotland and England. And then it was the music that came over from Africa. Those were the 2 areas that really were decisively influential in the kind of origin of folk and country and popular music in the United States. The banjo, for example, is an instrument that comes from Africa. And, you know, really all rock and roll, and I'm getting to Bob Dylan here in a minute, but I want to just reflect on what we're talking about here with this kind. I mean, this is poetry. This is the poetry of the people, and it's contracted language and storytelling in contracted language using rhetorical device with the addition of melody. And I just find it to be about the most powerful thing, out there, deeply moving. And I think rock and roll was a progression that combined a lot of elements. It combined the blues, it combined jazz, it combined folk, it combined country, gospel, the spirituals of the South. You wrap all that stuff up together and you get rock and roll. That's what true rock and roll is. And I think the best rock and roll band of all time, and a lot of great musicians, Eric Clapton, Ringo Starr, plenty of others would agree, is a band that very few people even know about. And that band is called The Band. The Band. Which, interestingly, if you ever want to watch a fantastic little rockumentary or concert, watch The Last Waltz, which is about the band's final concert in California back, way back when, 50 years ago. But they combine all of those elements beautifully, of blues and jazz and country, and they throw in the drum, and they plug it in, and it's electric, and it's great stuff. It's great stuff. Interestingly, the band started out and got its foot in the door, so to speak, by being Bob Dylan's backup band. That's where the band comes from. That's in fact where they got the name from. Bob Dylan just referred to them as the band. It's Bob Dylan and the band. So we turn to Bob Dylan, who I think is not only the greatest singer-songwriter and troubadour in American history, I think he's one of the best poets in American history. And let's just, for a moment, appreciate a few things about the man Bob Dylan, who is about 80, 81 years old, from Minnesota. The first thing I would say about Dylan is that he's absolutely prolific in the kind of way that Chesterton was prolific. I mean, he didn't have to, he's been writing music, I think, from the time that he could speak. He cut his album his first album was cut over 60 years ago. And by the way, he's still active today. I saw him not too long ago. Katie and I went up and saw him he still tours, and he still produces great music. His voice is not so good, but he still is writing, and the muses are still flowing. He's written over 800 songs. Those songs have been recorded by over 2,000 different recording artists. There's a running joke that we have, and that Katie and I have, when we hear a song, or we wonder about the origin of a song, and we say, who wrote that song? Where'd that song come from? The safe money is always, the answer to that question is always Bob Dylan. That is the safe money. Just a couple examples. Knocking on Heaven's Door, covered widely. All Along the Watchtower, made famous by Jimi Hendrix. How about this one? Made famous recently by Darius Rucker, but really done best and burst on the scene with Old Crow Medicine Show. A little song called Wagon Wheel, written by Bob Dylan. Most of the songs out there, when you get right down to it, if there's any question about their origin, just answer Bob Dylan, and you're probably going to be right. He's the only singer that I'm aware of who is published in the Norton Anthology of Poetry. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2017, which, by the way, he refused to accept, didn't show up for his award. And I'll get to that later, because I think that's another thing I admire about Dylan. He's prolific. And I would say, of all the singer-songwriters that I know, his style of writing is it's the purest poetry. It is the most hyper contracted use of language in a singer-songwriter that I am aware of. His command of the entire Western canon, of all the archetypes of Western civilization, of all the imagery from classical literature, his command is absolutely complete of all of that. He is enormously well-educated, and has a profound and deep respect for the traditions of the artists that came before him. He combines the loftiest ideals with the earthiest particulars. He's a master of rhetorical device, of alliteration, of assonance, internal rhyme. You want to talk about sprung rhythm, listen to Subterranean Homesick Blues or It's All Right, Mom, Only Bleeding. I think he, in a way, is the father of rap, which maybe isn't too, maybe that's not a mark in his favor, but he is enormously influential. He's written ballads, he's written fever dreams, he's written laments, he's written love songs, he's written fun, happy songs. He can do it all. He's an absolute master. And finally, I would just say about him that I think Dylan is kind of like he's his own man. Early on, they wanted to turn Dylan into another Pete Seeger, another social activist. They wanted to put him in that box and make him a spokesman for anti-war, you name it. And he just repeatedly stymied their every effort. You could not put the guy into a box. You could not put him into a category. He's kind of this oracle who just stands apart from the rest of society, and I think is I'm being serious, is a channel of the muses. I think he is. And I think he's retained that kind of integrity and independence as this kind of oracle of this channel of the muses for his entire 60-year career. You look at the famous stars who have a long career, they end up getting political. They end up becoming, it's less about their work and than it is about the movements that they're a part of. Never with Dylan, never with Dylan. It's always been about the art and the poetry and the music. The criticisms, and I'll wrap up because I need to yield the floor, but the criticisms of Dylan typically come down to two things. One, he has a bad voice. Now, this puts him in a venerable line of singer-songwriters with a bad voice. Okay? My favorite singer-songwriters have bad voices. Bob Dylan, John Prine, Townes Van Zandt, and probably Chris Christopherson. None of those guys can sing, except for Bob Dylan. So you may not like his voice. I think that argues for the brilliance of his actual writing and poetry. But I think if you listen to Dylan for any length of time and just go beyond Blowing in the Wind, you'll find that Dylan's voice and the human voice is the most beautiful instrument. It is the most beautiful instrument. I think Dylan's voice is beautiful. I think he does things because I try to sing, I try to play, and it's very difficult to, you can lampoon Dylan in Blowing in the Wind, but if you go to some of his good songs, it's exceedingly difficult to do what he does vocally. He's a real master. It's very subtle, but he's I'm telling you, he's an excellent, excellent vocalist. One of his albums he quit smoking for. It's called Nashville Skyline. I recommend you listen to that album. It's one of my favorites, certainly. He has a beautiful, crystal clear, lovely voice in that album. He said that album was his attempt to write happy songs, and it is indeed a happy album. It's a beautiful album to listen to. I highly recommend it. But his voice sounds terrific in it. But I know I have immense respect for his vocal talent. Whereas I can't say the same about Townes Van Zandt. He's just a terrible singer. So is Chris Christopherson. They're just bad. The other criticism is just you trot out Blowing in the Wind, and you as if that's representative of Dylan. Of course it's not. If you want to hear Dylan, listen to. I wrote down a few songs, but I could give you 50. Listen to Tangled Up in Blue. Listen to Shelter from the Storm. Listen to Spanish Boots of Spanish Leather, which is in the Norton Anthology of Poetry, by the way. Listen to Subterranean Homesick Blues. Listen to It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding. Listen to one of his long epic ballads like Desolation Row or Visions of Johanna, which are masterpieces of poetry and of lyric poetry. So to me, Dylan stands alone, not just as a great singer-songwriter, but I think is one of the finest poets that America has ever produced, and one of the a singular talent who is, again, I think, this kind of high priest of the muse who has just been tuned from the very beginning to a kind of harmony and sympathy with the muses. Listen to Bob Dylan and go and 3 cheers for popular music. It's the music of the people.
Good job, Dan Kerr. I want to add Don't Think Twice.
Sure.
And My Back Pages, which really is kind of the anthem of that Bleecker Street time. Those are 2 of my favorites. All right, Dale, you've got 11 or 12 minutes to redeem this conversation.
Well, thank you. And I want to start by apologizing for my bad connection. I've tried 3 different servers and I'm finally now connected through my phone. That seems to be the only stable connection I have here. And I think it's working. So yes, well, I'm going to start by asking the question, the music of the age, you say the music of the people. Does the music of the age merely reflect the age, or does it influence the age? That's kind of the question we are dancing around here, or we've talked about it. Rock and roll started out as dance music, okay? It was dance music. And even George Harrison towards the end of his life, kind of reflecting on the Beatles, said, we were just a dance band. he couldn't understand that the Beatles had that much influence. And it started out, as a participatory form of music because people danced to it. And the participation then moved on to simply, drugs and sex. That was the way you participated in rock music. And the singers themselves, we were talking about astronomy earlier on, weren't they all called stars, these rock singers? They were rock stars. And they were all chewed up by a very commercial use of their talents, and the artists were either destroyed by their promoters or by their own excesses. But it was a powerful form, and I think you guys have all made that case tonight in the little bits and pieces I heard as I came in and out of our conversation tonight. But truly, it's a powerful medium. And in the late 60s, there was an artist named Larry Norman who wanted to tap into that powerful medium and use it to evangelize. He wanted to use rock music to evangelize, and he was the one who created Jesus rock music. It wasn't called Christian rock, or as it's now called, contemporary Christian music. He called it Jesus rock. And he had some truly revolutionary albums that at the time were too religious for the rock and roll people and too rock and roll for the religious people. but he was a troubadour. He was a master lyricist. His music was just as good as any of the other 70s rock bands. He put together a good backup band so that it was really high quality music. He had excellent artists performing behind him. And he himself played multiple instruments, guitar, piano, and even some wind instruments. And he used his medium really to evangelize. He was the evangelist. I'm going to read you some lyrics from one of his famous songs called Righteous Rocker, Holy Roller. And here are the lyrics. You can be a righteous rocker or a holy roller. You can be most anything. You can be a Leon Russell or a super muscle. You can be a corporate king. You can be a wealthy man from Texas or a witch with heavy hexes. But without love, you ain't nothing. Without love. Without love, you ain't nothing. Without love. You can be a brilliant surgeon or a sweet young virgin or a harlot out to sell. You can learn to play the blues or be Howard Hughes or the Scarlet Pimpernel. You can be a French provincial midwife or go from door to door with the death knife. But without love, you ain't nothing. Without love. And then, of course, in the 70s, you go to a bridge. And then after the bridge, the last verse, you can be a woman feeler or a baby stealer. You can drink your life away. You can be a holy prophet, get a blessing off it. You can fast for 50 days. You can shake hands with the devil or give your life to God on the level. But without love, you ain't nothing. Without love. Without love, you ain't nothing. Without love.
Those are good lyrics.
Those are good lyrics. And he was really good lyrics. He did ballads. He did a wonderful piece called The Outlaw about Jesus. And, and he was not only influenced by Dylan, he recorded some of Dylan's songs, but Dylan became an evangelical, you guys. He did. And as far as we know, he's still an evangelical Christian. And he did an album called Slow Train Coming. And it's got great lyrics, but they're all very, very Christian lyrics.
Yeah, he recorded at least one of those and at the studio there at Muscle Shoals in Alabama, where Jason Isbell records now.
And of course, Highway 61 Revisited is Highway 61 going from the Twin Cities up to Duluth, where he was born. And Larry, let's just take here is his album Only Visiting This Planet, and it was voted the #1 contemporary Christian music album of all time.
Wow.
Yeah. And my sister took that picture because he was married to my sister, Larry Norman. And the backside is, we mentioned Stonehenge earlier. There he is. Okay. All right. And his most famous song, unfortunately, was I Wish We'd All Been Ready. A lovely ballad, but it's about the rapture, the evangelical thing about Jesus returning and all the Christians suddenly disappearing, and you've been left behind. That's the closing line. You've been left behind, and Left Behind, as we know, became a great let's say keystone for the evangelicals, the whole series of the Left Behind stuff. And what Larry was trying to do was, to use this medium for Christianity. And what he accomplished was not what he wanted. And talk about influence, because all that bad music in churches today, all those electric guitars and snare drums up on the altar, that's because of Larry Norman.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he brought that music into the church. He didn't evangelize the culture. He unfortunately weakened Christian music is what he did. That was the unintended consequence of what he tried to do. And I mean, that's talk about a huge influence. That was a very bad influence. And sadly, he predicted that when the Christians got a hold of rock music, he said, they're going to just start doing their own top 40 Christian music things, and it just all became commercialized. And the Christian rock bands produced very bad music and with bad banal lyrics, and the praise and worship stuff, that's really all because of Larry Norman.
Yeah, Dale.
Wait, I'm still talking here.
Okay, go ahead. I have questions.
The good, well, I want to hear your questions. The good influence, though, I hope, is that Larry Norman was the one who told me to read G.K. Chesterton.
No way.
Yes way. And, that changed my life completely.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And I hope that because of that, there's been some good influence that came out of Larry Norman. He and my sister sadly were divorced in 1980. But I knew him throughout the 1970s, the most influential period in my life. It was when I, was a teenager through high school and college. I became a minor celebrity in the Christian circles because I was Larry Norman's brother-in-law. And, but that's what got me to start reading G.K. Chesterton and eventually led me to the Catholic Church. He did some amazing things, but because he had a very limited theology, he was brilliant, lyricist. Billboard magazine called him the best lyricist since Paul Simon. And you should look at some of his songs. They're really outstanding. And just for the lyrics alone. And he struggled. He was caught up in the world, and sadly, after he divorced my sister, was remarried, and that marriage also failed, and he ended up having a child out of wedlock. Ironically, he prophetically wrote a song back in the early 70s. I had a baby out of wedlock. Her old man got me in a headlock. I mean, that's a great rhyme, It's a great rhyme. But ended up being sort of cast out by the community that he influenced and that made him famous. Because he didn't live up to it in the end, and sadly he passed away in 2009 at the age of 60, and he's buried in Salem, Oregon. And on his tombstone, it says, evangelist without portfolio. And it's the only grave you'll ever find that has a mailbox next to it. Yes, I walked up to the grave and looked both ways, and then opened up the mailbox, and his brother put CDs in there of his music so people could take his CDs. It's great.
Lending library.
Yeah, lending library. It's a giveaway. But the great question is, how does the sacred and the profane work together? He tried to use profane secular music for the glory of God, and to bring the gospel to people. And I know that people's lives were influenced by his music, but really it was more the profane came into the sacred is what happened. As I mentioned, this awful music came into the church, and we are suffering because of that. So my question, as I leave it with you, is go back to William's thing, that vision of hell that the B-52s were talking about. Is all rock and roll a vision of hell? Is the profane simply a vision of hell? That's the question. How does this end? How does this end? Rock and roll music, has it really done good for the world? It's more about sex, drugs, and rock and roll than it is about uplifting the culture. And ...
Yeah, and at 6:01, we're going to let the fans of the Troubadours discuss that question amongst themselves. You know, Dale, I do have one question, actually a couple, but one I do want to know is, how did it feel to talk for 15 minutes and only mention G.K. Chesterton one time?
Gross. What a
I'm trying to make my screen look frozen.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, that's a valid question.
It's a rhetorical one. You don't have to answer.
Yeah,
I'm sympathetic to a lot of what you say. One thing that I think rock and roll, you said, George Harrison said we're a dance band. For sure, that's a lot of it. And dancing, what they call dancing, obviously is tied to what rock and roll, or so much of what rock and roll is really about, and that's fornication. And I've always kind of thought rock and roll it's about fornication, and it's protest music. And so while there may be reasons to write poems and sing songs about those two topics, the medium does not. The medium is inappropriate to liturgical and sacred themes. It just is, and I cannot get this point across to, for example, some of the younger people on my staff, including trads who go to Latin Mass, and they would never want to have what they call P&W, or the praise and worship, in the sanctuary, but yet they will listen to it in the car. And I just I can't get my imagination around it.
Listen to praise and worship music in the car.
Yeah, while riding in the car.
I
think if you're going to listen,
I don't get that either. But I don't get listening to rock music. I mean, the rock is now at the point where we have this thing called classic rock. Classic. We use the word classic to refer to rock, which means that when you go to the grocery store, you hear rock and roll from the 1970s. And I'm really tired of that. I'm really tired of that. That's
right. And that's now the conversation's really starting. Yeah. Because the origins of rock and roll, I mean, it comes from a lot of different streams, and most of them are pretty good. But the electrification, the drum, the synthesizer, and then as it becomes more commercial, what sells is the kind of music that appeals to the lower half of the body. That's what sells. It's immediately titillating, and you know, I mean, it's just that's what is marketable and sells. And so that has just come to absolutely dominate all of pop music. When I said I'm a fan of popular music, I mean the old popular music of the people that people made themselves. Popular music today is an absolute disaster. I mean, you could go to, and we got to wrap up, but I mean, it goes back to Plato. I mean, he identified the kinds of music and what they do to the soul, and the different levels of the soul that they appeal to. And pretty much all the music today appeals to the lower, to the libido.
Mhm.
And that's the problem with trying to bring that music into the church, is that it's inherently problematic.
Yeah, the medium is wrong.
The medium is all wrong. It's all wrong.
Yeah.
And you slap a little Jesus on there, and I think it's worse. I think Christian rock is worse than rock.
Yeah. And that's, not what Larry wanted, obviously. He didn't want it to be about just adding Jesus into it. He wanted to use the medium really to evangelize and to make people think and to change lives. But it ended up becoming just slapping Jesus onto popular music, which doesn't work.
All right, my friends, we do need to wrap up. And Dan, you want to make is there room left for February?
Oh, February. Yes, February is the Troubadours, the real thing.
Right.
Live and in person in Fort Scott, America. Join us February 17th and 18th at the River Room in historic downtown Fort Scott. We'll be talking about Catholicism in America. We'll have Chris Check, William Fahey, Sohrab Amari, Brian Birch, and
Scott Block.
My good friend, Scott Block, or the father of my good friends, Scott Block.
PrairieTroubadour.org.
Wish I could be there, but God bless you guys. Have a great time.
Dale, is your conference for sale yet?
Oh yeah, you can. I think if it's not, it will be very soon. But that's July, and the Troubadours will all be there in July.
Chesterton.org in the Twin Cities, right?
In the Twin Cities.
Glory to God. All right, brothers. We have there'll be no live stream. There'll be no
Not in February. We'll be back in March.
in March.
We'll be back in March. We'll target the third week in March. It'll be solemn. It'll be Lent.
It'll be ascetic.
We'll try to come up with a less esoteric theme.
Okay.
Goodbye, brothers.
God bless you guys. Bye-bye.
Ciao.